There's a word that gets thrown around in society a lot these days. It's a vile and disgusting word that offends me to the very core of my being. It's something that a lot of people recklessly allow into their lives without ever actually considering the full damaging effects it can have. It's a 4-letter word that starts with F. Fear. What did you think I was going to say? I want to talk to you tonight a little bit about some of the effects that fear has had in my life and some of the lessons that I've learned as a result of that. But before we get too much into it, it's important that we talk a little bit about fear itself and what fear really is. You see, on the surface, fear looks like any other human emotion. Happy, sad, angry, joyful, fearful. It all looks the same. But believe it or not, fear goes a whole lot deeper than most other emotions. You see, fear is actually a survival mechanism that's rolled right into our very genetics. How many people here are either scared of the dark or feel uncomfortable going into a dark room by yourself? Lots of people. That's because thousands of years ago, for our ancestors, the dark time of the night was when the apex predators came out to hunt. When our ancestors ventured away from the safety of the fire without the rest of their tribe, the chances of them dying were astronomical. And over the years, humans evolved an instinctive fear of the dark in order to ensure the preservation of our species for the long term. And here we are thousands of years later, and we still feel the effects of that. The thing is, the world back then was a radically different place than it is right now. How many people can remember the last time you almost died? I don't mean Starbucks got your latte wrong and you could have died. I mean legitimately thought your life would come to an end in the next few moments. Not very many people raised their hands, but I bet that 50 years ago, twice as many people would have raised their hands. And 100 years ago, this entire room would have raised your hands. 5,000 years ago, it would have been a weekly, if not daily, occurrence that you faced the prospect of death. And as a result of that, humans evolved a number of fears, just like the fear of the dark, that were designed to protect us from dangers in that ancient world. Does this make sense? The thing is, society and technology move a whole lot faster than evolution ever possibly can. My friend Eric Edmeades talks about it as the evolution gap, the time between where society is technologically and where our evolution has caught up to. Unfortunately, in that discrepancy of time, a lot of the dangers that we evolved fears of have disappeared off the face of the planet. The world we live in today is dramatically safer than it ever has been before in history. And yet we still feel the effects of those ancient instinctive fears. But we're humans. We don't know what we're scared of, and we love to imagine things. Whenever there's a gap in information, we love to fill it with stories. So we get scared of all kinds of different things. Most of them aren't even that dangerous. When I think about fear in the modern world, I like to think about it in two different categories. I'll give you a little bit of an example. I was riding my quad through the mountains one time, having a grand old time out in the forest by myself. Not a good idea, I know, but whatever. Having a fantastic time, looking out at the nice views, rolling along, and I came around this corner, and I saw movement out of the corner of my eye. Out of place movement. Immediately my demeanor changed, and instead of gazing out at the mountain vista in front of me, I was intensely focused on the spot. What was that movement? As I got closer, I saw a grizzly bear cub wrestling with another grizzly bear cub. And if you know anything about grizzly bear cubs, you know they often come with full-grown mother grizzly bears equipped with big claws who want to kill you. Before I even realized what was going on, I had slammed my machine into reverse and got myself out of there. And as I kind of tried to shake it off and think about what happened, it occurred to me that this is healthy fear. This is what fear evolved to do. It steps in with the adrenaline response when your brain is not working fast enough to compute what's going on and get you out of danger. That is healthy fear, my friends. But there's a kind of fear that is far more dangerous than any grizzly bear could ever be. And that's the kind of fear of something that isn't dangerous at all, and yet it holds us back from living our lives full out. It holds us back from doing the things we really wish we could do. When I was 20 years old, I was starting my first business. I worked full-time at a golf course in the mornings, and in the evenings I would go and do landscape projects for people on the side. For about a year and a half, it went awesome. But after a while, I started to become completely overwhelmed with the workload that I was facing, and I had a very difficult decision to make. You see, I couldn't survive on my paycheck from the golf course alone, and my business wasn't creating nearly enough revenue to pay all my bills yet. In my heart, I knew the right thing was to abandon the golf course and double down on my business. But how many of you have ever been scared you were going to run out of money? That's a thought that went through my head dozens of times an hour as I was trying to make the painstaking decision. And every time I thought it, my fear built up higher and higher and higher. And eventually, one day, it drove me to do something completely ridiculous. I parked my mower on the middle of the driving range that I was mowing. I phoned my boss and said, "I quit immediately. Your mower's in the middle of the driving range." I took my business and threw it out the window of my life. And I went back to a job that I had quit just 2 years earlier because I was miserable. Imagine that. In that moment, the thought of daily misery at work was more pleasant than the fear I felt about maybe possibly running out of money. And let's be honest, running out of money would be uncomfortable, but short of depending on the American healthcare system, it's not a death sentence. Wayne Dyer once said that when he was in financial troubles at the early part of his career, he reminded himself he could always go to the grocery store and steal grapes. That's a beautiful way of looking at how unimportant money really is. And yet, I let it stop me. I let the fear of running out of money, absolutely no danger to me, stop my dreams. Now here I am 10 years later with a business in the landscape industry. Only I missed out on 10 years of the best parts of my life to develop that business. And just because of fear, I had to start again. The first time I really understood how much of my personal resources fear was leaching out of my life was when I was a teenager climbing Mount Yamnuska. You may or may not be familiar with the mountain, but there's a part on the mountain where there's a ledge walk. It's about this wide, 40 feet long. On one side, 500-foot sheer cliff to the bottom. On the other side, rock face. The Park Service has been good enough to bolt a chain to hold on to, but that's just about it. So the first time I had to make that ledge walk, I approached it and I was terrified. I was starting to tremble. My breathing was shallow and in the top part of my lungs. I was staring intently at that drop that I absolutely did not want to step off. It was all I could do to muster my strength and hold that chain in both hands as tight as I could and inch my way across the span. Half an hour later, when I was on the other side, I was completely exhausted and humiliated because I had been passed by all kinds of different people. And I sat there eating my lunch for what felt like hours while I recovered the energy to carry on up the mountain. The second time I had to make that ledge walk, I was with a friend of mine who was far more experienced mountaineer than I was. He saw me getting nervous as I approached and he said, "Wait, think about this. All morning we've been clambering over boulders, roots, things like that, and there's been a slope we could have tumbled down to our death that was 10 times more dangerous than this ledge. There's nothing to trip on this ledge. It's flat. There's even a chain you can hold on to. If it wasn't for the drop, you'd walk across it like nothing." My friends, that tiny little shift in perspective was all I needed to confidently take that chain and relaxed walk across that ledge. 30 seconds later, I was on the other side and on my way up the mountain. But in that moment, it occurred to me that the last time I did that hike, simply being scared of that ledge walk cost me over an hour of my precious time. And if you're familiar with mountaineering, that can mean life and death in some situations. So what had I been so scared of? See, the thing in life is you'll always have two choices. You can either manage your fear and live life on your terms, or you can let your fear manage your life and you can just sit around waiting for it to be over. But let me ask you this. What's more scary facing your fears of some things that may or may not actually be dangerous, or waking up one day and realizing that you've wasted tons of time forgetting to live simply because you are too scared. Thank you.